Welcome to the 22nd tutorial of my Tableau Server Client series. This series is dedicated to showcasing how to use Tableau Server Client to automate various tasks. In this video, I will walk you through how to create, update, and delete subscriptions managed on your Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance using Tableau Server Client. To create a subscription for a user on your Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance, you'll need to create a subscription object or item. To create a subscription object, the user ID of the user for which you would like to create the subscription for, the schedule ID, and subject are required. To update an existing subscription, you simply need to specify the subscription object and corresponding attributes or properties you would like to update. And to delete a subscription, simply provide the locally unique identifier value associated with the subscription. In most instances, you will not have memorized a subscription's locally unique identifier value, so I recommend first fetching the subscription object to get the necessary value. At this point in time, the Tableau Server Client library supports subscriptions minimally for cloud instances. This is due to the differences in ways subscriptions are handled behind the scenes on Tableau Cloud instances compared to how they are handled by Tableau Server instances. Hopefully, in the future, Tableau Server Client will be updated to provide the same ease of use and functionality afforded to Tableau Server users. To showcase each type of request, let us jump over to Visual Studio Code to begin developing a script that creates a subscription on my Tableau Cloud instance, updates the same subscription schedule, and finally deletes that subscription. Okay, to get started, we're going to run this initial configuration/setup block. This block is responsible for creating an authentication object and a server object. This is going to allow us to connect and sign into my Tableau Cloud instance. If you're unfamiliar with how to connect to your Tableau Server or Cloud instance, please check out tutorial 2 of this series where I walk you through how to connect to your server for the first time. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so this block ran successfully. The first step we want to do in this tutorial is we want to create a subscription on my Tableau Cloud instance. What I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to jump over to my Cloud instance to show you how you might do this manually on the front end. So you're going to go to the item for which you'd like to subscribe to or subscribe a user to. So in this case, I have a workbook open. And what you would do is you would go to the workbook. You would click watch, you would click subscriptions, you would type in the user, so me, for example. You would choose whether you want to subscribe the user or yourself to the view, so a view is a worksheet or a dashboard within a workbook, or subscribe them to the entire workbook. You can also choose whether you want the email subscription to contain an image of the report, a PDF, or an image and PDF. There's also this option to not send if the view is empty. I don't ever particularly check this off because sometimes it's helpful if my users alert me that, hey, something went wrong. Ideally, that wouldn't be the case where your customers or your consumers are having to alert you. You would hopefully catch it before there's an issue, but typically, again, I don't check this box. Another option is to populate a subject. So what is the email that is being sent to each of these users going to contain in the subject line? In this case, I just put daily sales. Optionally, you can also add a message or a body to your email that could contain important details relevant to the report. And then finally, a schedule. So you'll choose your schedule. You can choose hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, the frequency. So every day, every 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, etc. When do you want the subscription or email to fire off? And which days of the week, right? So if I want every day of the week, choose daily, every day, and all 7 days of the week at 5:20. You can also choose a time zone. Okay, so I would click subscribe, right? It would generate the subscription, and I would go and look at that. So I'd click subscriptions. Let's see, okay, I have a subscription for daily sales, all days of the week at 5:20 p.m. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna delete this real quick, and then we're gonna recreate this. Except the schedule aspect, I'm going to use a default schedule for that. That's already been created. So I'm going to unsubscribe. And let's jump over to Visual Studio Code to create this subscription programmatically. Okay, the first step we want to do, and what you're going to notice is the pattern for creating, updating, and deleting subscriptions is relatively the same. We need to first identify which user we want to do this action for. So to do that, we're going to say user is equal to server.users.filter. And I'm going to filter based on the name of the user. On Tableau Cloud, the name attribute is actually the user's email. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that email here, belonging to that user. What this is gonna do is it's going to retrieve the user object associated with the user of interest. So I'm gonna say retrieve the 2B subscription owners user object. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. So we have the user object associated with the user that we want to subscribe the content for the user. And the reason we need this is because whenever we create the subscription item, so whenever we create the subscription, we need to identify the user's ID value associated with the user you want to make the subscription for, right? So let's go ahead and continue. The next step is we're going to retrieve the 2B subscriptions content. So in this case, it's going to be, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a workbook or review. And you'll need that ID as well. So we're doing this because we need, whenever we're configuring the subscription, we need the local unique identifier value associated with the workbook or review. So what we'll do is we're going to say target. So what's the target content? The target ID. We're going to say server.workbooks.filter. And we're going to say name. So same thing. So name is equal to. And the workbook we were just looking at was called North America Sales. So we're going to type that in. And we've created our target. So this is going to return the target workbook that we want to subscribe the user to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this real quick, and we're going to examine the objects returned by each of these filters. Okay, so let me just add a new code block here. Let's say user, and I'm going to say user, and then I'm going to hash that. And I'm going to say _dict. So this is going to return that user object. So I'm going to look at the attributes maintained for the user. Users.filter. What have I done wrong here? Let's see. Missing site ID. Okay, let's sign in first. Okay, so I never actually ran this. And okay, so I need to actually do this within the block. So I didn't assign it. So let's do user equals user 0 print user. Because what's happening here is this is a query set object. And as soon as I actually slice it, the query is firing off, but not until then. So let me go ahead and do that within the block or within the context manager. And I'm signing in. So I'm going to type user 0, just user actually, ._dict. Let's print this off. And this is the user object we retrieved. So it should be associated with my user object. So we have the ID value, the external auth user ID value. We have the ID value that we actually need to pass into the subscription item that we're creating. And some other information. So the email address, full name, that's me, and the name attribute, which is, again, the email address on Tableau Cloud instance. All right, so we got that. Let's go ahead and look at the target as well. So the target is going to be the workbook object that we're trying to subscribe the user to, and in this case, me. So I'm going to say target is equal to target 0, and then let's just go ahead and print those attributes out. All right, so here is the workbook that we identified as the target for the subscription. Has the URL, has some other information, but the important piece is the actual ID value that we're going to pass into the subscription item when we create it to identify which piece of content we want to send the user via email. So we have the name, North America Sales, which is expected. We have the owner ID, which is, this should look familiar. It was just the ID value of the user object we just examined. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and pass this in when we create the configure the subscription object. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to say configure new subscription item. And I'm just going to say new subscription is equal to tsc.subscription item. And let's create this. And the attributes that we're going to provide, or the values we're going to provide, is we're going to provide the subject. So previously you saw on the front end that we went ahead, provided a subject, we provided the schedule, and we provided the user along with the target, right? The target was already predetermined based on the object we clicked on or the workbook we clicked on to create the subscription for on the front end. So I'm going to say subject is equal to North America Sales. And let's just say report. Let's do demo, it's fine. And schedule ID. So the schedule ID value, I'm actually going to copy and paste in here. And the reason being is I mentioned previously in this video that the endpoints are configured for Tableau Server and Tableau Cloud instances are different. Unfortunately, the way I have to do this whenever I create a subscription on a Tableau Cloud instance, I actually have to provide a pre-existing schedule ID. And what that does is it limits my capabilities of creating subscriptions on the fly a little bit here, because ideally what I want to do is I'd want to mimic the front end capability of where I can create a subscription and create the schedule simultaneously. Unfortunately, on Tableau Server, you can do that, but here we can't on this cloud instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in a schedule ID value that I know exists, and it's associated with a schedule that's pre-existing. Okay, so that's going to be the locally unique identifier for the schedule that we're going to assign the subscription. This is the schedule ID. Okay, the next step is the user ID. So who are we configuring the subscription for? Well, we know that that's going to be the user. So the user we returned using this filter. And in order to get the actual user object, we're going to access the first index of that query set object. And we're going to say .id because we need the ID attributes of the user object. The next step is we're going to identify the target. So the target is going to be, you probably guess it. So we're going to say TSC target. So we're going to create a target item. And we're going to say target 0.id. And what is the target type? So this is in the front end in the dropdown, we chose either a view or a workbook. This is where we're going to identify whether we want to do the same. So I'm going to say target type is equal to workbook. Again, this could be a view or a workbook. You could technically put view here. But if you put view here, you need to ensure that you are accessing the views endpoint instead of the workbooks endpoint, and you're getting the right ID value, the right target ID value for that particular view. So this is the workbook name, but the view name is actually called daily sales. So this wouldn't work if you were accessing the view because you need to change this to view, and you would need to get the right target ID value associated with the view of interest. All right, so we have our subscription item. Did I spell this right? TSC subscription item. Okay, I did. And the next step is we're going to access some of the attributes. So some of the attributes, if we look at this now, let's just go ahead and look at this actual the subscription item that we've created. I'm going to say new subscription _dict. And let's just go ahead and print this out. You'll notice that some of these attributes are not populated. So page orientation, not populated. Page size option, not populated. Attach PDF is false, right? Send if empty is true. By default, we're sending if it's empty. What we can do is we can modify these attributes, right? So we don't want to take the defaults. So the way Tableau Server Client library has this set up is when you initialize a subscription item, you can't actually initialize the item or object and create and modify these attributes at the same time. So we have to do it afterwards. So if I want to say change the message of the subscription, right? There's no message in this. If I want to change the page orientation, I basically just need to access those attributes and modify them in place. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say new subscription .message. So I'm going to access the message attribute, and instead of none, I'm actually going to provide a value. So let's just say, please see the attached North America sales report for today. We can also do specify whether we want to attach as an image, a PDF, or both. Let's go ahead and do both. So I'm going to say new subscription. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this a few times because we're going to modify a few attributes. All right, so let's go ahead and say attach image is equal to true. So we're going to provide the image of the report in the email. Let's go ahead and do the same thing as a PDF. So we're going to also attach a PDF. And what else do we want to do? Let's do the page orientation. How do we want this to be laid out? So this is a little bit tricky. I would highly recommend that you go to the documentation to understand how to specify the page orientation. What you're going to need to do is use tsc.pdf request options .orientation .portrait. So this is going to be in portrait mode. Same thing with page size option. Consult the documentation. You're going to do the same thing. So we're going to copy and paste this, except we're going to say, instead of orientation, we're going to say page type. And I'm going to say letter size. Next thing I want to do is, on the front end, we saw send view if empty. It was a checkbox, right? By default, whenever you initialize a subscription item object using Tableau Server Client, it's going to be true. So actually, as I previously mentioned, I don't check that box. So I want to go ahead and put that as false. So I'm going to say send if view empty is equal to false. And what I'll do is I think we'll stop there. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop there. We won't modify any other attributes. I'm not sure why it's highlighting everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna print this back out so we can view the attributes maintained for this new subscription. Okay, let me go ahead and delete this. Okay, so now we have a attached PDF is true, so it's no longer false. We see our message, which is accurate. The page orientation has been set to portrait, as we specified. Page size, letter, schedule ID, we're good. Send if view empty, false. Subject North America sales demo, suspended, false. We're good there. And yeah, so we've configured our subscription item. Now all we need to do is we need to send a request to create this on our Tableau Cloud instance. So let's go ahead and say subscribe the user to the target content. What we'll do is we'll just use a try except else block like I've done in previous tutorials. You don't have to do this, but you may want to do it for some type of error handling in the future. I'm going to use the subscriptions endpoint and the create method at that endpoint. And what am I going to create? I'm going to create that new subscription item. So what we need to do is we need to pass in that subscription item or object, and that is new subscription that we just configured. If that doesn't work, let's just go ahead and print out a generic message to the user. What will we say? Unable to create subscription for user dot name. So what this is going to say is unable to create subscription for CMP160 at 130@gmail.com, right? So it's going to print out their email if there is an exception raised, any exception. And what the case is if there's any exception raised whenever you use this create method, it's going to fail. So there is no like halfway creating a subscription. It's either all or nothing, which is a good thing. So if we succeed, there's no error. What are we going to say? Let's just do provide the user feedback saying that we successfully created subscription for, and then the same thing, user.name. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Delete these extra lines. All right, and we successfully created the subscription for my account. What we're going to do here is we're going to prove out that this worked. Let's go ahead and jump back over to my Tableau server, my cloud instance. You'll notice that I haven't refreshed this page, so there's still 0 subscriptions. But if I refresh it, we're going to notice there's one now here that we just created. So we just created this. And you'll notice that if I go in here, so let's just change frequency. We don't have a frequency. I change subject. We could change the subject if we wanted to manually, which is what we created that subject line using the API. We could change formats, right? So we currently have it as image and PDF, letter, and portrait based on the options we provided previously. The schedule, right? So this is the schedule we used based on the ID I provided. So this is a default, or not a default one, but it's a pre-existing one that's provided on every developer instance. It's just one of the schedules you can choose from. I have no idea what SSS test weekly means. I just know that it's a schedule that has a schedule type of subscription. So I can configure this subscription using the schedule. On your Tableau Cloud instance, you may have pre-existing schedules that have more friendly names than SSS test weekly, hopefully. Okay, so we've verified that the subscription was created. Let's jump back over to Visual Studio Code to update the subscription schedule. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me open Visual Studio Code. Okay, and we'll scroll down here, and we're going to to start off, to update the subscription schedule, we're going to do much of the same that we did previously. So we're going to identify the user who owns the subscription we're trying to update. We're going to identify the content, so the target. And I'll get to why we're going to do that here in a moment. Why do we need the user why do we also need the targets if we're not creating something? Let's go ahead and start by copying and pasting what we used previously to identify the user and the target value, or the target workbook. I'm just going to paste this down here to avoid you having to watch me type. So again, what does this do? It returns the user object associated with this name or this email address. What does this do? It returns the workbook object that has a name called North America Sales. And the reason we need that is because we need to retrieve the subscription that requires this update. And how do we know which subscription that is if we're not identifying it simply by the ID value? Well, the way we're going to do this is we're going to say subscription is equal to, and this is going to be subscription. I need to spell this right. For subscription in tsc.pager server.subscriptions. So what does this piece of code here do? It's going to return every subscription on my server with it, and it's going to be provided in a list using the subscriptions endpoint. So if I were to run this, right? So if I were to run this right now, and I only have one subscription, so it's not really too meaningful here, but let's just do print subscription 0 and spell this right. Okay, so here's the subscription object we returned that is in the first index of this list of subscriptions. If you have hundreds of subscriptions or you have thousands, these will all be returned in a list. So you'll have, say if you have 1,000 subscriptions, you'll have a list of length 1,000, and you'll access those based on their index value, right? But we don't want all these subscriptions, right? What we want to do is we want to identify the one that's associated with this user, and not only with that user, but this target content for this North America Sales Workbook. So what we're going to say is only include the subscription in this list of subscriptions if the user ID value associated with that subscription is associated with this user ID value of the user we returned, right? So for me, right? So this is going to be my user ID value, and the target ID has a ID value equal to this workbook's ID value, right? So what we're going to do is here is we're going to say if subscription dot target dot ID equals target 0 dot ID and subscription dot user ID equals the user's ID. So this is saying that only include that subscription if the target ID value for that configured subscription is equal to the ID value maintained for this workbook, and if the subscriptions is associated with a user with an ID value associated with this user, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And what I'll do is I'll just do this. I'm going to pull out that single subscription because there should only be one subscription associated with that user and that piece of content. So I'm going to say subscription is equal to subscription and just index this out, access that first attribute, and let's go ahead and say subscription underscore dict so we can see the attributes maintained for that. Okay, so here's the subscription ID value, not super important, but the important piece is that we identified the subscription of interest because we were able to get the subscription that is associated with the target content, so the target ID and the user ID, right? So here's my user ID, and the target content ID is here, which is associated with that workbook called North America Sales. So this is a surefire way that you can identify the right subscription that you're trying to update. Now, this whole process that we just went through was just to ensure that we identify the right subscription and we update the right subscription, because you don't want to update every subscription schedule. You want to update just this one, in this scenario at least. So update the subscriptions schedule. And what we're going to say is we're just going to modify the schedule ID attribute. So the schedule ID attributes in this case Let's go to it. Where is the schedule ID attribute? So it's none currently. Okay. What we're going to do to update this is we're just going to modify it in place. So I'm going to say subscription dot schedule ID is equal to, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in, again, this is a limitation on with Tableau Server Client library when you're using the cloud instance. This is highly disappointing because on the Tableau Server, it works so much better. If you use Tableau Server, this library works so well with subscriptions. And subscriptions is the only endpoint that has like this issue when you compare it from cloud to Tableau Server. So I wouldn't worry about that if like you're a cloud user and you have a cloud instance. Every other endpoint that I've worked with is perfectly suitable and has the same functionality. It's just the subscriptions endpoint, the objects and the attributes maintained, the way it works is just completely different, it seems. So what we have to do here is we have to actually identify the schedule ID here in advance. So by the ID, I need to pass in this pre-existing schedule ID. There's a different schedule that's already been created for the Tableau Server the Tableau Cloud developer instances. So we're going to do that here. And basically what's going to happen is the schedule ID attribute is going to update from none to this. This is going to allow me to update the schedule for that subscription whenever I call the update method at the subscriptions endpoint. Let's go ahead and do that now. So same idea. Let's use a try except else block. We're going to use the subscriptions endpoint, but this time we're going to use the update method, and we're going to pass in the subscription item. If there's an issue, we're going to notify the user. So I'm just going to say, I'm just going to take this, right? So I'll take this, copy and paste it, unable to update subscription for that. If we're successful, take the same message, modify it slightly. And then we'll execute this. Okay, so we successfully updated the subscription for my account. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to Tableau Server or my Tableau Cloud instance. And let's take a look at that subscription. Okay, so I haven't refreshed this again. What you're going to notice is this is the schedule currently. And what we should see whenever I refresh this is the schedule has changed to another pre-existing schedule. So let's go ahead and refresh this. And now instead of weekly, we have daily, right? And we have all days of week at 2:30 p.m., 8 UTC. All right, so we've verified that this has worked correctly and as intended. The last step I want to do is I want to actually go through and programmatically delete the subscription. And before I do that, let's just go ahead and create a few of subscriptions for my user, right? So I'm just going to go, let's just create another one of these, a few of these, because I want to show you how you can scale this. So you can scale deletions, you can scale updates, like you can do this for just more than one instance, right? So you don't have to just create one subscription or update one or delete one. You can delete many, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create a few more. Let's go ahead and do workbook. Let's just do random stuff. I'm just doing random stuff. So let's do another one. And let's do the view, and let's just create a monthly one. Again, random. So what we have here now is we have 3 subscriptions associated with me for the same content, but at different frequencies. And the idea here in this next step is we could delete just one, but if you know how to delete one, then you can quickly, put that in a loop, right? We can create a for loop, iterate through the subscriptions owned by my user ID, and delete all of them one by one. This is actually super fast. You can do this with thousands of subscriptions in less than a minute. All right, so let me go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code. And the same thing applies again for create requests and update requests. So let's go ahead and go down here. And what are we going to do here? Again, the same pattern, except this case, I'm going to first identify the user, which is me. So get the user object that I want to delete the subscriptions for. And then I'm going to identify all of these subscriptions owned by my user. So let's just go ahead and copy and paste this piece here. And then we'll create a list of subscriptions using list comprehension again that are owned by me. So I'm going to say retrieve the subscriptions requiring deletion. In this case, I'm just going to delete all of the ones maintained by me. You could just do one, but I'm going to do them all here just to show you how well this works. So I'm going to say subscriptions is equal to subscription for subscription in tsc.pager server.subscriptions. So again, the subscriptions endpoint. If subscription dot user ID is equal to user ID. So if the subscription is owned by me, so owned by this account, then we're going to delete it. What do I have here? What issue do I have here? Do I have subscription for subscription and blah, 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 server.subscriptions? If so, I make this error more often than not. Okay. So now we have a list of subscriptions owned by me. Let's go ahead and print those out. So let's go say for subscription and subscriptions. Print subscription dot underscore dict. So let's just take a look at these. So what we're expecting to see is we're expecting this list of subscriptions to contain 3 subscriptions. And what we're going to see is each of those objects and the attributes maintained for each of those printed out here. Okay, so we have 3 as expected. The ID values associated with the subscriptions, the options associated with it that I preset. 2 of these I didn't really do anything for, right? So you don't see a message. I just created these on the fly just for this example here, how we can delete multiple subscriptions while iterating over a list of subscription items we returned here using these subscriptions endpoints. Okay. So instead of printing these out, what do we want to do? Well, we want to delete them. So I'm not going to go through the effort of making this try except else block here. I'm just going to show you how to delete them. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the subscriptions endpoint and you guessed it, the delete method. In this case, the only thing I need to do to delete a subscription is provide the locally unique identifier associated with it, because we're not updating anything, right? We don't need to pass in the entire item. We're not creating anything. So I just need the ID value. So I'm going to say subscription.id. And we'll run this. Okay, the script successfully executed. So now let's just do this. Let's jump back over to Tableau Cloud. And what we're expecting is if I refresh this, we're expecting this to show nothing, right? To show that my subscriptions for this view, or sorry, this workbook, has been deleted. And there we have it. So we deleted 3 subscriptions programmatically in one go. Again, you could actually, what you could do, let's just say there's a subscription you want to delete for each user that's tied to the same content and the same schedule. What you could do is you create a script here. So you build onto this and you identify each of those users. So you iterate through those users, and that actual subscription, you delete all those subscriptions programmatically for each user. You can also have a mapping file that does something similar to where you could say, hey, I have this user that has 5 subscriptions and I'm onboarding this other user to the same team. They should be subscribed to the same content. Well, you could have a mapping file, or you could find that content and the subscriptions programmatically. And you could basically say, hey, I want to mirror this user's subscriptions using the create method that we walked through earlier in this video, right? So super useful for onboarding and even offboarding, right? If you want to offboard a user, you can't have any orphaned content, and that includes subscriptions. So we could just delete these subscriptions programmatically so that we can offboard the user. Okay. So what I want to do now is just quickly, before I wrap up, I want to show you where these scripts that I've walked through will live. So on my GitHub, I have a repository for Tableau Server Client, which I've developed and I'm adding onto with every tutorial. Whenever I first started this series, I posted the getting started tutorial. So your how to authenticate, right? So these are just very good starter templates for authenticating, how to query server objects for the first time. So in this example, I show you how to query all the data sources maintained on your Tableau server or Tableau Cloud instance and print out all the information maintained for each, like the data source ID, owner ID, the name, project ID, project name, etc., which then allows you to, so if you understand how to do this and you understand slowly how to interact with each endpoint, you can create reports for each of those types of objects, so favorites, data sources, flows. Or you could actually, you could come here and create a Tableau Server master report, which is going to allow you or anyone else to understand just about everything about your Tableau server or cloud instance. You're going to be able to report on groups, users, so all these objects here in one report. And it's going to write that to an Excel file or your destination of your choice. In this case, I did write it to an Excel file, and it's a single Excel file with one tab per object. So you're going to have all of the information within a single workbook. I also showcased earlier in the series, how to refresh data programmatically. So if you want to trigger a extract refresh or trigger a flow to run or a link task to run, I have the code to do that here, right? Your slight modifications. So I call these my nearly ready to go scripts. You're obviously going to need to swap out the token value, the token name, the site ID, of course, just really the authentication aspect, right? And then if you want to, modify anything I have here or expand on it, then you can. But this is going to give you a great start for automating things on your own Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server instance. And what we covered today, that's actually going to be here in the subscription section. So adding, updating, and removing objects folder, there's a subscription section, and you're going to see create, delete, and update. So here it is, right? This is what we walked through today. And you'll be able to access that very easily here. Okay, so that wraps up this video on modifying subscriptions programmatically through Tableau Server Client. I hope you found this tutorial useful and can use the concepts I've covered to level up your ability to manage your own Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud instance through automation. If you enjoyed this video, then please like the video and subscribe to my channel for notifications on future videos. Thank you again, and see you next time.